Daphne, it is so good to welcome you to the Leaders Who Care series. Welcome.
Thank you, Mark. It is so amazing to be here. And I believe that I'm a leader who cares.
Well, I think we're going to, what is it? Is it Kansas? That's the show me state or something? I think we're going to put everybody in a state that they're going to see why you definitely deserve to be on a Leaders Who Care series. And as always, the best place to start is to find out who Daphne is. And we'll get to the business aspects and all that in a bit, but a little bit about where you're originally from, where you are now, your family, your favorite color, something you've never told anybody in the world, maybe that you want to tell now. That would be kind of, um, so go for it.
Sure, let me go for it then. Yeah, I'm Daphne Jones. I am a mother, I'm a stepmom, I'm a grandmother. I serve very proudly as the first lady of my husband's church. So I'm a pastor's wife as well. I am a relatively new author, Mark. I am the author of a book called Win When They Say You Won't, which is right here. McGraw-Hill published this book for me just about 5 or so months ago, 6 months ago, and just it's been a lifelong dream I've had, not lifelong, but my adult life dream I've had to be able to share as I learn. I like to learn and then teach and learn and share. So that book allows me to do that. I am retired, so I am over 60 years old, and I retired as a senior vice president at GE Healthcare, and I've worked for various other Fortune 50, Fortune 100 companies in vice president or senior vice president capacities. And then after I retired, I decided to start a startup business. So I'm the CEO of a really small startup that helps people to get ready to serve on paying boards. And then I'm also serving myself on three public company boards. One is an aerospace company, one is a healthcare company, another one is a one of the world's largest designers and manufacturers and distributors of doors. And so I work and serve as a board member of those three companies. I'm a boxing enthusiast. I love to fight, and both with my words and with my hands. I'm an amateur boxer. I'm not a professional by any sense. My husband always told me, "Don't come home with this nose flattened." So
Good
I had
advice.
I had to learn how to, protect myself at all times. And so, yeah, so I'm a boxing enthusiast, I'm a scuba diver, and all that. And so, and how did I get, and I'm an accordionist, I play the piano and the accordion
Wow.
and, and all that. So I've been really blessed with having a diverse set of interests. And you would not have known that I would have had that from my upbringing and my beginnings. My mom and dad had us in Illinois. It's a very small town called Phoenix, Illinois, one of the poorest towns. I think it's probably a village. I think they call themselves a village, and one of the poorest towns or villages in Illinois. About 1,500 people, no grocery store, no post office, no bank, just a bunch of liquor stores and a few churches, and then and the 1,500 of us that live there. And my mom and dad were Jamaican immigrants. They came from Jamaica. I'd say undereducated. They weren't uneducated, but
Right.
they did not go to college of any sort. And so my mom cleaned bedpans in the hospital. She was not even a nurse's aide. She was below that. And my dad did the assembly line at a manufacturing company in the midnight shift. And there was four of us in four kids and the two parents. So the six of us lived in a two-bedroom house in Phoenix, Illinois, and the house didn't have any of the things that you would expect a house to have, except it did have heat, and we had to put water in the radiators to be able to generate steam. No air conditioning, no dishwasher. Well, actually, that's not true. I was the dishwasher. Um, but we didn't have the automatic one. We didn't have a washer and dryer. We didn't have, like I said, I think I may have said air conditioning, no shower. We had a bathtub, one bathroom. And so it was just a very humble life. We had a little garden outside. We had two dogs and a cat named Sparky. and we ended up living life. And mom was always proud though to be an American, or to be in America, even though she was from Jamaica and was able to immigrate to the US. And she just said, Daphne, no matter where you are, the opportunity is above you. Don't let your lived and current circumstance dictate where you are or where you are going to be, because you already have this covered. Where you are right now, you already got that. But where you need to think and aspire to be is up here. That's where the opportunities are. And she's what was always impressing that on us. So education was what she felt was the main way for us to be able to get there. And so as a result, three of my siblings, the three siblings that I have, they went back to Jamaica, I guess to learn the Queen's English, because Jamaica was under the British rule at that time.
Right.
And so they went there, and I didn't like Jamaica at all, which can you imagine I would say something like that?
No, I can't actually.
But when you're in Jamaica, you're not at Sandals. We weren't staying at Sandals. We were, living in a place where
Yeah.
chickens were running around, and the way you're going to eat dinner is you kill one of those chickens, and that's how you ate dinner. And so it was, not quite the same as going away
No,
to
it's
Sandals. And so I didn't. I'm sorry, you were saying?
no, I was saying it's not the same going to Sandals. And by the way, I will add one thing.
Yeah.
My daughter-in-law is from Denmark, and they don't say stepdad, stepmom, they say bonus dad, bonus mom.
Oh, bonus. Yeah. I don't usually even distinguish I usually just say those are my kids.
Yeah.
And when they say you have four children, well, okay. Not naturally, then you get into the discussion. So I just kind of nip it and say step. But I love the bonus because that's true. Uh my son has two fathers, his stepfather and his natural father. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. I love that.
So you kind
Um
of given me a sense of what it was like as a kid. You said you didn't have an automatic dishwasher, but you were automatically the dishwasher,
yes.
uh, and stuff. So what were you like as a kid? Were you like reading, playing sports, volunteering, playing? When did you start playing accordion?
Yeah, my mom, I think I was 5 years old when I started playing the piano, and I had a teacher that would come to the house, and my mom had a little box piano that I would learn how to play, but the keys were so wide for my little hands. And I said, you know what? I'm gonna get out of playing this piano. I'm gonna tell my mom that I can't, the keys are too big. So she said, okay, all right, keys are too big. You're gonna get an accordion because you are gonna play something. And so the accordion, as you know, the little keys
Oh,
are much, yeah, really tiny. So then you got the added complexity of the bass keys with your left hand. And so as a kid, I was very precocious. I was always scheming. I was logical. Well, why? If that is that way, then why isn't this way? Like pattern recognition, I think came really early for me, and I was very persistent. And I would argue a lot. And my uncle Henry would always say, Daphne, you would make a great. He called them liars. He said you'd make a great liar, meaning a great lawyer.
right.
And because I would always try to argue my way and logically do it. So my mom was so into education that she taught me, Daphne, go out in the alley, which was filled with pebbles and rocks, and she would say, "Bring back 2 plus 3 rocks." And if I brought back anything but 5 rocks, I was in trouble.
That's
And
cool.
so I ended up, huh?
That's very cool.
Yeah, so I ended up skipping first grade because she taught me so much when I was at home, with her. So I skipped first grade, and then as I went through school, I was a defender of the underdog, but I was also a pom pom girl. I was a lassie, a Scottish dancer. I was very involved with school choir.
Uh,
I was also a preacher's kid. So if you had told me that I was going to marry a preacher, I would have bopped you on top of the head with a frying pan, because being a preacher's kid wasn't the most fun. They say that the PKs, preacher's kids, politicians' kids, and policemen's kids, they're the ones who should be the most well behaved, and oftentimes we're not. So I wanted to hang out with the homies. I wanted to go party. I wanted to date. I just wanted to do things that preachers' kids, should not be doing. So I was kind of precocious growing up, but I recognized that school was really my main job, and I had to do well in that.
So you could have been the star of Footloose then, because wasn't she the daughter of a preacher
Oh, yes.
and
Yes, she
everything?
was.
She
Yes,
was
she
great.
was, and then what's his name kinda came and tried to,
Kevin Bacon, I think.
Kevin
Right.
Bacon came up and tried to change all that. Yeah, so that's exactly right. I was the epitome of that, and I saw how my mother was as a first lady, as a pastor's wife, and I said, "Mm-mm, not me." So
Not me. So what intrigued you then to go on, did your bachelor's, your MBA in management at Illinois State University? And I got to ask you also, what about the manager of this at the Capon Cinema? Was
Right, right. Sure. Well, I gotta go back a little earlier
okay.
because what I didn't share with you was when I was in high school, even though I was part of the pom pom squad and I tried out for cheerleading, but I didn't make it, but very involved and did really well in school. I said, well, my high school counselor has not come talk to me about going to college. So I went and talked to him. And I said, I'm a junior or a sophomore, whatever. I forgot what year it was. And he said, Daphne, black girls like you don't go to college. It'll be impossible for you to make it. And if you try to get in, you won't get in. If you do get in, you're not going to graduate. And if you do happen to graduate, no one's really going to hire you. So I suggest what you do is do what, girls like you should do, which is become a secretary. And so I did that, because you're listening to your counselor. They're paid to know what to tell you to do, and so I did exactly that. And so I went to secretarial college or secretarial school for like 2 weeks. I knew how to take shorthand, and I took shorthand in high school. And shorthand is where you use symbols to depict words, so you can write really fast. You can write at the speed of the language that's being spoken without having to have people like wait and pause. And so I did that and I learned how to type so I could take my own notes in my classes in college and type and transcript them. But so I took that and he said, so shorthand and typing already. You're going to go to secretarial school, which is where they teach you how to make coffee, how not to sit in somebody's lap when you're taking dictation, and how to behave yourself in a professional office.
Right.
Crazy. And so I did that, and I went and I became the secretary for the associate editor of Women's Day magazine. And little did I know that this magazine was run by all men. I mean, all the men in this office, all the people in the office that had the corner, the window, the exterior offices around the perimeter, they were all men. I'm like, that's interesting. A woman's magazine run by men. Okay. So that was sort of the beginning of my knowing that things aren't always congruent as you would expect. And so I was horrible at it. I was judged very harshly. I made mistakes, certainly. And, they would tell jokes and laugh at the secretaries, female jokes, and you would hear them and you just feel like crap. And so I realized one day, this is it. I don't know what this counselor is talking about, but I'm not going to be a secretary anymore. I'm going to have a secretary. And the only way I knew that I could do that was these guys that are here, they went to college. So I need to go to college, even though this man told me I wasn't going to make it. And so why'd I study business? Well, these were businessmen. So I figured I got to be like them or beat them. I got to learn business. And so it became like that. Went to college, got in obviously late after my high school graduating class, and I studied business. And I think because Mark in my ear was this counselor saying you'll never make it, you'll never graduate, nobody will hire you, that I ended up getting my bachelor's degree in 3 years instead of four, and I got my MBA, and I went on to get my MBA, and I got it in 1 year instead of two. I wanted to be a lawyer because my uncle Henry said I'd make a great liar. And so I wanted to be a lawyer, but I took the LSAT, didn't do a great job on that, didn't know anything about preparatory classes and stuff. So I didn't go there. So I did not get my JD, but I got my MBA. And then right after I did that, IBM hired me. So the audio that he said in my ear did not match the video that was playing out in my life. I got into college, I graduated early, and I got a job working for who I thought was and was at the time one of the baddest companies in the planet, which was IBM. So I began to realize that the word impossible is somebody's opinion. That was his opinion. but I proved them wrong. So I started, and as again, as I talk about pattern recognition, you start to realize that sometimes there are things that people say that just aren't real. And so the word impossible was really the new word for me was inevitable. When I set my mind to graduating from college, when I set my mind to something, if I choose to do it, it's just inevitable. It's not impossible. And so when I was in college, I needed money. You know, my parents were pretty poor, and they had sent my other two sisters and my brother to college, and I was the baby. And I don't know how they afforded it because I don't think I took a loan out at all. So somehow they had saved, and college was not as expensive, I guess, as it is now. And it was a state school, not a private school. And so I became a manager at this cinema because you know on the campus was the theater, and I just needed money, and I found that they were hiring a manager, and I didn't know, but because I was taking business classes, I think they figured I'd make an interesting manager. I was oblivious, Mark, to what being a manager would entail. I knew I had to balance the cashier, the cash register at the end of the night, and I had to make sure turn off all the lights and make sure there was enough food. I mean, that was about it. But there was a time I'll never forget that I did something, or a customer did something, and I was really adamant and upset and angry about what they did. They tried to sneak in, or they did something wrong. I don't know what it was, but I was so worried about being right than I was about serving that customer. And the customer was a student, clearly, because it was a college campus. Um, but I remember he took out an op-ed in the newspaper, in the college campus newspaper, talking about this manager at Cape and Cinema. And then I did a retort back to, against his op-ed, and it was just crazy. And I don't think they fired me because I was right, but it was that moment that I learned that, you know what, they're giving money to us for a service, and they have a choice as to where they go. And so that was really like sort of the last time that I had that kind of attitude about a customer, where I was worried about being right versus serving their need.
You know, it's funny where we get our experiences.
Yeah.
We do a lot of work in talent, impact and talent, both together. And um, it's I've found that experiences are way more important than years of experience that you bring into the table, and you get it from the weirdest places. A very quick story because of time. You know, I met this young person who had said he had no experience, and he ran this. I noticed on the bottom of his resume, he ran the Santa Claus parade, and
Mm.
I had run the Santa Claus parade in Winnipeg, Canada. I was the first Jewish guy to run a Santa Claus parade in that.
Mm. Okay.
Be involved in community stuff, I knew there was a lot of stuff. So I said, "Well, yeah, you're probably right. You don't have a lot of experience. What about the parade? What'd you do there?" He said, "Well, I had to talk to the city. I had to do budgets. Had to do sponsorship. Had to talk to the sponsors who wanted to be in a certain place in the parade. And if it rained, I had to figure out what was going and all that." I said, "Yeah, you don't really have any experience. So you picked up experience on don't always have to be right, and yet all the stuff that goes into it, the experience you picked up from what the guidance counselor said, and then is kind of related, if you knew it or not, to the title of your book."
Yeah. Yeah. Because my counselor didn't want me to win. Or maybe he did. Maybe he thought that was winning.
Exactly. Maybe that.
Was being a secretary was winning, and what I didn't like was that he put a label and he put a limit on me. You know, nothing wrong with being a secretary or an administrative assistant, but don't tell me that all I can be is that. I tell me that I can be anything, then we'd be friends. But he put a limit and a label on me, and he defined my narrative of what winning was to me. And that's why I want people to know you can define your own win. You just have to understand the guidelines, the rules of the game. You know, even basketball players, much money they make, they still have to come to the game dressed a certain way. I mean, there are guidelines that you have to understand and abide by,
Yeah.
if it, based on the context of where you went. So yeah, I uh,
So
I
we
want folks to.
yeah, 100%, 100%. We Fifth Element, we got founded based on the premise that leaders and their businesses can always do way better when they're doing good. And
Mhm.
you've made some great achievements, and I think even thinking that from a unique perspective, where you were the highest ranking African American woman at GE, you were the first woman person of color.
GEIT.
EIT, sorry. Yes,
Yep.
exactly. Good clarification. You were the first woman and person of color to report to the chairman of the board and the CEO, shattering the glass ceiling. You would put it at Hospira. So, can you describe a couple of experiences you've had engaging with leaders in corporate America's healthcare industry, where you are supposedly doing good? And how was the conversations like? What were the experiences like where you had to have an economic value to each business, but as well as make a positive social impact?
That's okay. That's a huge question.
Yeah.
So first of all, what I will say, I'll try to break it into two parts. How you see the problem is the problem. That's what I've always been taught. And part of the gift that innovative and intellectually curious people have, i.e., in healthcare, is that, and in the world, we have to learn, then we unlearn, and then we relearn. If anybody just learns and doesn't change and grow and unlearn and kind of reset their paradigms, it's kind of hard for them to drive innovation. And so when you're opening your mind, to it, then I think you can be innovative. So many executives are stuck in a paradigm that they've had for years. This is the way it was. This is how it is. So this is how it's always going to be. But innovation comes from when we question the status quo, when we don't accept no, right, for an answer. So my time in technology, as you know, was I was a technologist. I was a director of IT, and then after several years in technology within healthcare, I became a chief information officer, which is the highest ranking IT role that an organization can have, is the VP or SVP and CIO, Chief Information Officer. But at the same time, I was a patient. I was in the medical system, and I remember when I was with Johnson and Johnson. And Johnson had three divisions. One was a consumer division, a device and diagnostics division, and then a pharma division. And so I was in the consumer division. It was around the year 2000, 2001, and I had responsibility for all of J&J's consumer manufacturing facilities from an IT standpoint. I was not the engineer on the floor, but all the stuff that the engineers needed from an IT standpoint, I had to provide it for our liquids business, which was in New North Brunswick, baby shampoo, baby oils, our wound care division, band-aids, gauze pads, uh, you name it, all kinds of all over the world. So I had responsibility from an IT standpoint. One day I went to the grocery store looking for stockings, and I saw at Walgreens that they had stockings and they had them in the color nude. And so when you look at my skin color and
Yeah.
then you looked at what they called nude, it was like this. This is my nude. When I'm nude, this is my color. But when you look at the nude in the grocery store, it had a different color. It didn't match what I would wear. So, and then when something was, you know, dark that were my color, they were called coffee or brown or black. So this created an idea in my head that when I went back to J&J and I looked at our band-aids coming off the line, I said to, the person in I think it was marketing or R&D, I said, why don't we not make band-aids only in beige or nude, but consider making them in a variety of colors that match the diversity of skin colors that are in the world. Now, maybe this is the beginning of DE&I or inclusion or something. I don't know. But they ended up actually doing that. Now, I'm not saying that I take all the credit for that. I certainly didn't get recognized as the one who brought that forward, but this was an idea that I had in my head, and I didn't know they were actually going to do it. But it wasn't based on helping me; it was about helping others. So innovation happened, but sometimes it takes one of us and somebody who doesn't look like the other people to bring an idea forward that might actually help and grow the market share. So while I was doing well at J&J, I wanted to also do good for other people. And I think a lot of people want to do the same thing, but don't know how to get out of their own paradigm. This is how it always was. So when you talk about a social impact for other people and future employees and families, I believe that I had to be resilient at Johnson and Johnson and in other parts of my career. And I think my resilience created some kind of a role model. Like I said, I was a little girl, I was precocious, I was logical. What do you mean I can't go there? I didn't tell you that I got beaten up by a bunch of I'm not sure how old they were. They were teens, like 13, 14, white boys in when I was in a place called South Holland. I was visiting a white girlfriend of mine. We were no more than 8 or 9 years old, and her name was Kathleen, and we were trick or treating. It was Halloween, and she and her dad invited me over for trick or treating and bobbing for apples, which I never heard of bobbing for apples before, but they do that there. And so we were out there in the with our little costumes on, with our little pumpkin, you know, basket.
Oh yeah.
Um, and these boys were trying to take our candy. And I said, "Leave us alone. This is our candy. Go get your own." And then they saw my hands, because my hands weren't covered up with the costume. My face was and everything else, but not my hands. And they said the N word. There's an N word. Let's go get her. So I was beaten up, and then Kathleen ran home and got her dad, and he came, and by then I was on the ground. And so I've always been this resilient, precocious, I'm a fight for what's right kind of person. And so being an African American, and then the intersectionality of also being a female, I didn't have very many role models. And so a lot of people didn't have role models. And I think, they say turkeys learn from turkeys and tigers learn from tigers. Where does a black female that's in STEM learn from? Right. So usually, they say you have to see it in order to be it. And I didn't see it when I joined IBM. There were a few women, but there were very few or no black women that were doing what I was doing. And so normally as a person of color, Mark, you got to tread lightly, and you got to be still and quiet lest they see you and you stand out in a way that is not acceptable or accepted by the majority. All of a sudden, while you're doing your thing, you're doing what you see other winners do. It's not necessarily that you can do what they're doing, even though they're doing it and you're doing it, but you're not them. You're not the majority. And so it was really hard, to be able to say, but again, this precocious, logical girl, well, they're doing it and they're human. And I didn't always see that I was black, and I didn't see that you have to address issues a little differently because you are not them. And so I had an audacity and a willingness to treat and manage and speak to others without regard of my handicap, of being black. So if there was a role, I went after it. If there was an injustice, I tried to rectify it and address it. But then after, time in business, I had to learn, there are rules of the game, and not all the rules apply to each person differently. So then you had to learn about emotional intelligence. Then you had to be about situational leadership and understand certain situations call for certain kinds of behavior, much like the Cape and Cinema situation. And so I had to make sure that I showed up in a particular way. So I believe that I became that role model for people. I became what I think society, my little society of people around me, started to get to appreciate. And so now my book is my next step of saying, well, I can't be on every Mark, show. I can't hold that many mics in my life. I'm hoping that my book will help you to read in the privacy of someone's home, or be able to listen audio about how to take the word impossible and then turn it into inevitable. How to take what you're doing that while you're doing well, that you can also do good for yourself and do good for your family, and do good for your company.
Well, I love a quote that I picked up. They say the fourth industrial revolution was about technology, AI, especially now in tech and all that. But the fifth is about humanity, which is what you're talking about. And
Yeah.
we work a lot of on the intersection of impact and talent, and how that makes things sustainable. But I love what you said and I'm quoting. I believe I'm quoting. When you feel like you are being buried, always remember you are like a seed. Seeds find strength to be able to come back up above ground. Your job is to bloom wherever you are planted, and to reach back and help others to do the same. Sounds like that's what you just talked about, right?
Yeah, it is. And I didn't realize Gandhi said this, because I talk about they, the name of the book is Win When They Say You Won't. It's like, who's they? And
Mm.
Gandhi says, first they ignore you, they, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. And so when you think about being buried, Mark, that's exactly right. There, every time a policeman stops a black person for no cause except because they're driving while black, every time a woman goes to her doctor and he poo-poos her or she is poo-pooed because what that feeling that she had in her arm couldn't be a heart attack, go home and just take a couple aspirin, you'll be fine. They're burying you, right? Every time that I was going into college or you wanted to go to college, I was told that I wasn't good enough to make it in. I was a black female. Every time a judge sentences somebody for the harsher penalty for the same crime than somebody who's in the majority, they're being buried. And I believe that that's exactly what happens. And we forget that when you're buried, that you can find a way to look for your resources. There are resources available, like the water and the silt and the nutrients in the dirt. There are your role models, there are your sponsors, there are the mentors that you have, there are your neighbors, there are the people that work next to you that seem to care about you. They're not only in your circle, they're also in your corner. When you go to the corner with a bloody nose, like a boxer might, there are people that can help you stand back up and come above ground. And I believe that's sort of what winning is about. When, even though I'm buried, I get back up. But while I'm getting back up, I'm creating fruit on my tree. I'm creating corn on my branches. I'm not just rising up just to rise up. I'm rising up so I can help other people. And so I believe that we all can be a seed because we all will get buried by life or whatever circumstances come our way. But we got to know that we can reach down and get resources to come back up.
Yeah, we'll talk about influencers in a couple of minutes, but it, it people are put in a position, whether you say it's God or whatever, put in a position to have an opportunity to take advantage of that and influence others. And I think a lot of times we have to realize that we're influencing people all the time. Your
Hmm.
guidance person, even if that person may have been educated to think that way, was influencing you, not in a good way, but maybe the way he only knew or she only knew. And so we should remember, like you're saying now, that we should water some of those seeds. We should, when we're talking to anybody, we're influencing them, and it's our choice to be positive or negative on that. And you could be influencing the person that has the next cure to who knows what.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. And I don't know, I know cancer, breast cancer can happen to any woman. Um, you don't have to be black for it to happen. It's not a black cure for cancer.
Yeah.
It's a cure for cancer. It's not a white cure for cancer. And it's so funny that even though diseases sometimes can be more like sickle cell, I think is one disease that more blacks might have. But very few diseases are only for a particular color. Um,
Well, we have
or
a
race.
Jewish one has our own disease too, so we're right there with you. We got one also. So, but you're right. It's almost ridiculous. I wanted to ask you one last question on this point. A client told me in 2021, he was talking about 2020, and he said, 2020 was the year that flew by slowly, and I thought that was really a
Move by
cool thing.
slowly. That's clever.
And so with that, and what's happened in the last couple of years have been crazy adventure for everybody. Um, with that said, what are you most grateful for, and what are you most hopeful for?
Well, it's funny that those last years really touched me in ways that I wouldn't have expected. And it's chapter 13 in my book, which is interesting. That's an unlucky number, but I had breast cancer in 2021.
Mm.
And while I was writing this book, while I was looking at publishers and trying to pick out ghostwriters and all that, all of a sudden, January 9th of 2021, I got the call. And they said, Miss Jones, your biopsy came back positive. I always wonder, why is that positive? It's really negative. But
It's a good point.
anyway, I know, I'm just kidding. I know. But it was positive. And uh, so long story short, breast cancer, thank God it was, very early stage 0 and very tiny and all that stuff. But so what I'm grateful for is my health. And I'm grateful for the fact that I did not let breast cancer stand in the way of me wanting to share my life story and the stories of other women that are in this book, I didn't want to let that make me quit. I had to pivot a little bit, but I still persevered through. So I'm grateful for my health and that, the doctor says, Daphne, you're going to die, but you're not going to die of breast cancer. So that was really enlightening. He scared me at first, then he, made it a nice light joke. So, and I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful for my grandchildren, my two boy grandchildren. One is 2 years old and one is like 18 months old, and so
Awesome.
I'm really grateful for that. I'm hopeful for, the word woke is now a bad word. And I don't know if it means when you say woke, you mean black. I don't know what these MTG people talk about, but I'm grateful and hopeful that we'll have more woke people who believe in going forward to help all people and not going back in time where only some people matter. And that's my hope.
Well said. That's the best way to leave it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm grateful that you are a leader who cares and you stand up for that. And I'm hopeful that your grandchildren will take the legacy of what you've started and move it forward. So thank you for sharing and being part of this.
Thank you very much, Mark, and thank you for being a leader who cares.